Louis, it's such an honor and a pleasure to welcome you back to Sri Lanka.
It's fantastic to be back.
I'm thrilled, well, to welcome you because it makes us happy. It looks like champagne, but it's actually Ceylon Silver tips, cold infused. I hope you like it. And so,
And no alcohol.
no alcohol at all. It's got that beautiful floral note of just the bud of the
Very
tea leaves
nice.
and bud. I'm glad you like it. So, in anticipation of our tea-inspired evening, I've thought we'd have a few words. And I wanted to ask you first the logical question. Are you a tea drinker?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Very
And
much so.
Strong, light, with milk, without?
No, I have French habits. When I was young, my mother always mixed quite strong Indian tea, like or Darjeeling and so on, with Earl Grey, and I always hated it. And then I went to France. When I started going to France, they drink it quite weak and with no milk or sugar, and that's how I like it. I drink it French style.
Well, that's nice.
But I find even a strong tea, if you don't leave it in very long, you get French tea.
Well, yeah, I mean, like this. So this is a cold infusion.
Yeah.
So you get the aromatics, the floral note that you get on the nose. Now, getting down to real business.
Yeah, okay.
I loved Captain Corelli's mandolin.
Yeah.
But amongst all your work, the one I really like is Sunday Morning at the Center of the World.
Oh, really?
It's beautiful. It's a poem that is so inspirational.
Yeah.
But of course, present-day Alexandria is a little bit different. But tell me, you have so much variety in your work. The richness, of course, you've got themes of colonial themes, you've got political themes, you've got historical themes. But what inspires you?
I think what inspires me is what I inherited from my parents. They were both big readers. My father wrote poetry. He also recited poetry. He used to memorize poetry, and he would recite it at, Sunday lunch. This above all unto thine own self be true, and bits of Shakespeare, And then I had a succession of, three really good teachers at school who inspired me. And I think I knew by the age of 12 that I was going to be a writer. The way some people know they're going to be a doctor. And of course, as life has gone by, obviously I've been inspired by other writers that I've become interested in. So the writer I always go back to is Thomas Hardy, if you're familiar with him.
Yes,
But he wrote about unimportant people having difficult lives in the countryside. And I grew up in the countryside. I'm not very good at towns.
Is that what inspired your latest book, Light Over Liskeard?
What inspired that was reading an article in a magazine about quantum cryptography, about how new developments in computers will make codes almost instantly crackable. And if you think about it, that's very, very dangerous, because our entire civilization is controlled by electronic codes. So I have a man in here who's a quantum cryptographer. He thinks if I know how to break all these codes, other people do. So he buys a house in a remote part of the country where he will be safe with his family. That's the idea.
Now, in this book, you also describe mundane details of country life, talking about tree frogs. Is it also a statement on the way the world is going relative to sustainability and principles that we should be following?
Not so much sustainability. It's more about living in harmony with your own environment, so that your food doesn't have to come from thousands of miles away. If you live in a place like Bodmin Moor, you actually can go out and fetch a rabbit. It's not complicated. The other thing that the book is about is my concern that we've become enslaved by our own electronic technology, that we serve it and it doesn't serve us very well. I got my first smartphone a week ago and I already hate it.
So what have you been using?
It's trying to control me.
It does. It tends to do that. But what have you been using?
I had a little old, tiny little a Nokia kind of phone, and it only did texts and voicemail, voice calls.
Well, that's what a phone is supposed to do.
I lost it in Istanbul airport, and I thought, okay, now I've got to get a smartphone.
You've been, or you appear to have been fascinated also with South America.
Yes.
What is it about South America that you so love?
It was a stroke of luck. When I was 18, I had a brief time in the British Army, and I realised that I wasn't really cut out to be a soldier, and so I left, and I needed something to do, and I had a friend in my village whose uncle was an anthropologist who had been working with the Incas in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta in Colombia. And he knew a Colombian man who had a big hacienda with lots of children. And this man wanted a teacher for the children. So I applied for the job and I got it. And so I spent a year in rural Colombia on a hacienda. I had 3 horses. And that was the year before I went to university. And when I came home, I felt it almost impossible to feel truly British again. Because Colombians are not like the British, you know. That year away, I'd become used to being Colombian. And when I came home, Britain seemed to me very strange. I went to university in Manchester, you know, it's a city in the north. And in the 1970s, it was so depressing, you know. Everything was broken, everybody was on strike, everything was filthy. They didn't like Southerners, you know, I'm a Southerner. And I fell in love with a French lesbian. It was just terrible, you know. And it made me very nostalgic for Colombia. And in my mind, I remained in Colombia for 15 years.
Manchester to Colombia, I can't imagine anything more opposite.
No. But I mean, Colombia was very poor and it was extremely violent, so it wasn't. There was a lot wrong with it, there still is. Mm.
But you know, when you've gone to Anatolia, you've covered such a diverse range of topics. And with such richness, it's when you read your work, it's emotional because it's also realistic. It's very tangible because you feel. I mean, you illustrate things in such detail. So there must be a lot of effort, a lot of research and immersion that goes into this.
There is, but I only do it because I enjoy it. To me, it's never felt like work. It's always. I would hate there to become a time in my life when I stop learning. You know, if you're researching a novel and you've got a chance to learn so many more things, and also to meet people you never would have met otherwise. I mean, I wouldn't have met you or your father unless I was a writer. You know, it's so I think of it as you know, as the way that I've managed to keep myself amused through much of my life. But it is a lot of work, you know. I once spent 2 weeks walking around the battlefields in Gallipoli, you know, and my grandfather was there, and it was quite. I could see where his comrades were killed because the graves of his comrades were, you know, the Royal Naval Division. They were there, and there are still bones coming to the surface. You know, when farmers find the bones, they take them to this little house where they get taken away by the war graves people, yes. And if you go swimming in the sea there with a snorkel, the seabed is covered with shrapnel. You know, it's millions and millions of little round lead balls, you know. And
was that recently?
That was about maybe 13, 14 years ago. It was for a novel called Birds Without Wings, which I actually think is my best one. You know, thanks to having to do things like that and do research, I've made friends all over the world now.
I read somewhere that you actually play the mandolin.
Yes, I do. I always played it a little bit because I was a guitar player. You know, every guitar player has a mandolin. But then when I was writing Captain Corelli's mandolin, I started playing it all the time to get myself in the mood, you know, and I carried on. I still play it sometimes.
We have a few questions from members of our tea club. So one is the inevitable one. Do you think Captain Corelli is a tea drinker?
Well, no. I think
he's Italian, isn't he?
He's Italian. He drinks Sangiovese. He drinks red wine. He'll probably, you know, Chianti, that kind of thing. Probably not Valpolicella, but he drinks Montepulciano. I don't think he knows anything about tea at all.
And a lot of coffee, obviously, like all Italians.
I assume so, yeah.
Well, that's all right.
But what, you know, were they drinking so much coffee back then in the 1940s? I don't know.
Probably not. No, it wasn't part of their tradition at that time. But you know, Sri Lanka, we produced coffee before we produced tea, and we also.
I've always wondered, you still do make a little bit, don't you, of coffee?
We do. There is an artisanal coffee industry that's emerging.
Because I've never had any. I'd like to try it.
Ironically,
Can you get it at the airport?
Well, no, I'll get you some and send you some, because ironically, it's starting literally on the skeleton of the old coffee industry. Because on all our tea estates, you have a few coffee plants that are scattered around. So on that and building those, germinating, building seed banks and so on around those, the coffee industry is now nascent and developing quite well.
What kind of coffee is it? Is it Arabica?
Arabica,
It's
mainly
Arabica.
Arabica. Yes. But beautiful stuff. Very different, but you can be the judge. I'll send you some tomorrow morning.
That's great.
So the other question from Sarah at the Tea Club, she's asking, writing and creating can be all-consuming, especially as your characters are developing. How do you switch off and take a break as your book is bubbling away in your subconscious?
I have to switch off because, for example, I have to fetch my daughter from school at 3:20. So, and before I fetch her, I have to go to the shops to buy something to feed her in the evening. So I have to lead an ordinary life. And really, my mornings are for myself, and sometimes the evenings. So I'm actually forced to switch off. But the other thing I do is I go for long walks. I love walking. You know, English is a stressed language. So, and if you walk, your inner speech, I don't know if you think in words. I do quite a lot. But your inner speech it goes into the rhythm of your walking, and you get a sort of poetic feel to your own thoughts, and that quite often will, for example, inspire a poem.
Did you ever consider pursuing the line of poetry? I mean, I know you're.
No, I do. I have three collections published. That's probably two more, but publishers don't really like to publish poetry because there's no money in it. There's not enough audience. They seem not to know what to do with it. The three collections I've done, my publishers have done almost nothing to promote it, and everything has been done by me. Yeah.
So we have another question from Shona at the Tea Club. Teapot or tea bags? That is loose leaf or tea bags?
Yes, I understand that. I like all of them, but I've got a soft spot for those silver spoons full of holes.
Lovely, yes.
I
loose leaf tea.
I use those
with the strainer.
Yes,
that's
yes.
beautiful. Okay, that's a nice answer. So, have you enjoyed Sri Lanka so far?
Yeah, very much. But it's all over tomorrow night. I have to go home.
Well, I hope you'll return. Now, as a parting gift, we have Ceylon tea and Ceylon cinnamon.
Thank you.
My suggestion to you is please enjoy tea regularly. Garden fresh tea, it's healthy, it's good for you, and Ceylon cinnamon is absolutely spectacular when it comes to the health benefits and the sophistication of it's a beautiful spice. It's without equal.
I do use it quite a lot.
I hope one day you'll write a book about cinnamon, because cinnamon traces its history back to the time when King Solomon would visit Sri Lanka to trade in cinnamon. That's 4 millennia ago, and he called the city of Gaul Tarshish. I'm sure you've been to Gaul. It was called Tarshish at the time by King Solomon. Yeah. So what a rich heritage. It's an incredible.
I thought you were going to tell me that the Queen of Sheba came from here. But can you what's the difference between cinnamon and mace?
Oh, completely different.
Isn't it?
Mace, nutmeg, we've got lots of those spices, but cinnamon is from a tree, branches of the tree, which are they're rubbed and they're peeled, and then they're made into either quills or then they're powdered. Yeah. So that's cinnamon, whereas mace grows as part of a spice, grows on a kind of a nut.
But not on the same tree.
No, completely different characteristics.
And nutmeg?
Nutmeg is completely different to cinnamon. It has much more floral. It's sweeter. It's a completely different spice, but a beautiful one. Yeah. But cinnamon is unique amongst them. They called it the king of spices, and it is. Yeah. I hope you'll agree once you try this, because Ceylon cinnamon is without equal. It's a beautiful one.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Louis, it's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to dining with you, and thank you so much for agreeing to have a chat.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you again.
Thank you. Cheers.
And try your tea champagne.